Okay, so structureJS has a concept of grouping, and what groups allow you to do is take separate files and/or modules, and then combine them into essentially you can think of it like a namespace, right? And so here's an example. If I have a group of files that I use to handle UI events, I create a group, I declare a group called UI events in my manifest, and then you'll notice that now that's created a UI events namespace on top of structure.js, and I declare different modules onto this namespace, right? And so now when I want to drop uh, th my UI events into my main dependency chain up here, notice that my main dependency chain is declared directly on the structure.js object, right? So instead of suppose I use this UI events as a dependency in like three different modules. Without groupings, I would have to like copy these three files everywhere, right? But grouping allows me to just essentially create a reference to these three files called UI events and drop that in, right? The other cool thing is that groups that can have their own dependency chains. So you'll notice that my UI events also utilizes as a dependency my database, my DB group. Okay, so that's another thing is that groups can be nested in other groups. Okay, and so you can see that as an example, I have a database group that has an interface to IndexedDB that I wrote and an interface to MongoDB, and I can actually drop that in to my main dependency chain. It's called a top level dependency chain. I can drop that in here. Now, the so we'll look at the project manager interface because you'll notice that oh, sorry, that old manifest is cached, so we're gonna release that cache. Okay, so you notice that when my project manager interface lists the components of my project, it lists the groups, right? And so you may be saying, well, you may have looked at this before and said, what's the point of that? Well, the point is that suppose that this DB group, I find that I use this a lot. I'm on my third project where I want to use this DB group. Um, if I want to use that grouping, well, I'd have to copy this guy and this guy into every manifest that I want to use. Well, okay, but I know the DB grouping is going to use these two files, and I'm pretty set that this is what it's going to contain. Well, what you can do here in the project manager interface is here what you have is the contents of both files actually output in the order that's so actually a better example would be let's look at the UI events. Okay. So you'll notice that UI events has a dependency chain. Okay. Uh, mouse listener, key listener, but then notice drag resize depends on DB. So DB is going to be before drag resize. So you'll notice though that when the PMI output the uh, the contents of this group, it actually output them in the order that I declared in in the UI events dependency chain. So the use of this would be I could take this output, save it. I could create a file called UI events group or something to that nature. Okay. And I messed that up. But anyways, now I can save this as a single file. I call this a hard group. And now when I want to utilize this grouping in other projects, instead of doing this whole grouping thing, here in my manifest, I would, since it's now that group is now just a file, I would just drop that file name in anywhere else. So that if you had wondered why you see the groups here, that's kind of the main reason. And also you can, you know, have it compressed, right? So again, grouping is one of those things that I think is a unique aspect of structure.js that allows you to really provide a nice structure, but also a fluid structure because the group components can change as long as they're in this soft group format where I'm declaring them in my manifest. I can actually change how the dependency chain is structured. I can swap out files and or modules. So grouping can be a really powerful